Hey, good afternoon. This is Rafael Goodell, City of McAllen Wellness. I'm the health and wellness coach here, coming to you with a 20-minute class to talk to you about dietary fats. This discussion I'm about to get into with you, if you care to make a comment or leave a message for us, I'll see if we can get back to you right away. You can also call us in at the office at extension 1426. We're here from 1220 to 1240 to talk with you guys about different topics in wellness, and today's topic is going to be about dietary fats. Dietary fats fit in with the three macronutrients. We got proteins, fats, and carbs, and we use those things to make your meal plan when you come in to see us at City of McAllen Wellness. That's for the employee wellness program, and really, if a department or a group of people want to get together and request me to go out to your work site or your office, I can head out there and give this as a class in nutrition that can be from anywhere from an hour to a couple of hours or even a couple of days, so that you can help figure out what changes you might want to make to your meal plan or your diet so that you can get a better result. What we really would like to see is more people feeling better with more energy, and whatever target or goal you set, that we're going to be there to help you to reach that target or to reach that goal. So let's go ahead and get into the topic, dietary fats. And you know what? I have a note here. Almost forgot to mention it. Veterans Day. I want to say thank you for your service to all of our men, women in uniform that serve in the different branches of the military. Thank you very much for all that you do for us, and that I'm very appreciative personally. Okay, on with the show then. We are talking about dietary fats. So when we talk about proteins, carbs, and fats, these are the three macronutrients that are going to make up your diet. But when we come to the word fats, we end up with an issue. It's something funny about our language, how words that were created a long time ago to describe several situations or several things that were seemingly similar to each other, even as our knowledge evolves as a society, we don't necessarily change the original wording. So in the case of fats, sometimes you might refer to the extra lipids that you have on our sides just under the skin, right, as fat. And then you also talk about the food that you eat as far as your diet as fat. However, these are two different types of profiles, and one does not necessarily lead to the other. So the consumption of dietary fats, as the word stands, dietary fats, doesn't necessarily mean that everything that you eat that has fat will be converted to fat quickly, or in some cases at all. So let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by that, because that can be kind of confusing. All right, so we are going to say for the rest of this class, or for the purpose of this class, we're going to say that the fats we're talking about here are referred to as lipids. And lipids come in a couple of different types. You have your saturated and your unsaturated. Now, your unsaturated can be classified into monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. And these words, saturated versus unsaturated, we're talking about the chemical composition. And we don't mean to get too sciencey with you, but I do have to show you this. So this is going to be the one little bit of equation I can share with you for just a bit. You have these cool little bonds here, hydrogens and carbons. And there's a whole chain, right, of hydrogen and carbons. And we have them in saturated, and we have them in mono and polysaturated, different chains, right, that make up these lipids. So when you eat food, some of them have long chains and some of them have short chains. But the most important thing that you want is you want the ability to make use of that chain while you're trying to generate energy in the work that you're doing in the day. And so you have different food sources where you get fats from. I'm about to get serious here. Where you get fats from, and those different sources make up the different types of fats. So let me go ahead and give you some real examples. For example, in the monounsaturated fats, you have olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil, avocado, almonds, pistachios, peanut, So all of these are called monounsaturated fats. They're very satiating. When you are hungry, if you eat a handful or a small handful of pistachios, almonds, or even a bit of avocado, you will get a satiated feeling. You'll fill up really fast. That's because your stomach acid gets busy working on these fats, but they don't break down very easily. And because they help to buffer the digestive sensation, you actually feel fuller when you have these fats in your system. So monounsaturated fats, we're going to put those into good fats. You definitely need doses of those fats throughout the day, and you can eat them as a small snack that you can have pretty much any time of the day, because we use fat for several different metabolic functions. Let me go ahead and just list some of those metabolic functions right now. You use it for energy, structure, and membrane function. They're precursors to your hormones. They help to regulate the cellular signals. That means that your cells talk to each other, even your brain stem and all the different little dendrites that come off of it. There is fat that is required in order to make those signal exchanges possible. There's going to be a regulation and uptake of the excretion of the nutrients in the cells. So there is a lot of things that fats do. So a good, consistent supply throughout the day will help you out with it. Now, another type of fat, so we talked about monounsaturated fats, like olive oil, canola, peanut, avocado, almonds, and pistachios. And then you have your polyunsaturated fats. So we're kind of going on a good, better, best, and then we're going to head to the not so good and the worst. So we're giving you the best first. That way, in case you got other stuff to do and you stop this video early, at least you heard of the best oils or the best lipids or fats to use for your diet. So the next ones are your polyunsaturated. Polyunsaturated are vegetable oils, safflower, omega-3 fatty acids. Those come from fish. So these types of polyunsaturated fats, they're actually all around us. Like, they're in a lot of our food supply. The only problem is, and spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you how you take a good fat and you turn it into something really bad for us and horrible, not usable, that we're going to call the trans fat. And those are going to be way down the other end, okay, on the bad fat side. The next ones you got are saturated fats. This is where you have to start being careful. So again, vegetable oils, okay, olive oil, avocados, peanut, all that stuff got high fat in it, but you need it, so it's okay, it's on that side, on the good side. But now we're venturing into a place where you have saturated fats, and when you don't use saturated fats, or they're unusable by your system, or your metabolism's compromised, these fats are more than likely going to lead to heart disease and arteriosclerosis and block up the veins and the arteries. So we want to stay away from these or limit them as much as possible. Poultry, beef, lard, butter, cheese, cream, these are all very delicious, but at the same time also highly acidic. And so that means that when they're in your system, they have a tendency to change the pH balance of your system, leading to more rancidness inside of your metabolic system. So then you have meat, poultry, lard, butter, cheese, cream, eggs. Notice these things all go rancid very quickly. They have a tendency to attract certain types of bacteria. And so then those bacteria, if they're in your stomach lining or in your digestive system, are going to multiply. So we want to keep those saturated fats that come from animals out of the system as much as we can. Some of us, though, we've been brought up with meat, dairy, poultry. So to just pull it out of the system right away, our body wouldn't know how to handle it. It's going to take some time and just slowly scaling back, slowly removing some of these fats, butters, creams, and cheeses from our diets, so where we can regulate, but at the same time we don't shock the system. So it's good to limit your saturated fats. One saturated fat that you can not get enough of in my opinion, and it's one that I've really incorporated a lot. Oh, Esther's here. Hey, Esther. Um, is to add in coconut oil. So coconut oil is great for cooking in. You can put it into a lot of your recipes. You can put it and substitute it for a lot of the vegetable oils because those saturated fats are very filling. They're high in oils that you do need. So saturated fats, if you're going to use them, or if you feel like you're missing out on something, try to substitute it for coconut. Now, trans fat, so now we're into that scary zone. So we started off on the good side with olive, canola, peanut, avocado, and then we ventured into vegetable and omega-3 fatty acids. Then we said saturated, not so good. Okay, now we're going to head off to the dark side of fats, the scary side. This is stuff that you need to avoid as much as possible. Your organism has no need for these trans fats, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. And you say, well, then why do people eat them? And it is a trick played on us by the food industry that was only recently been developed. This is very recent, like from the 1950s on. These food-like products were created. They save money, they create a longer shelf life, and if you've been raised on them, they probably taste pretty good to you. So if you were to go buy something from a vending machine, for example, those things are usually loaded with trans fat for the purpose of saving the shelf life of that product. When you walk into a convenience store and they've got breads and cereals and they have all these different products and they can seem to sit there for maybe 3 or 4 years at a time without spoiling, that should be your red flag saying, okay, well, why don't these things spoil? But yet something, let's say I bought something at the panaderia or the bakery in the morning, by the afternoon it's already rancid or it's hard or we don't want to eat it anymore because it's unedible. That's because things that are fresh baked from bakeries have a tendency to not have any extra ingredients or chemicals or any trans fats that would increase the shelf life of that product. So if you are going to eat those saturated fats we talked about, like cheese, cream, eggs, whole milk, butter, dairy, or you're going to incorporate them into some type of bread product, the least you can do is eat something that is homemade or eat something that is from a baker or someone who produces food that does not use these extra chemicals. Now, you would actually need to go out of your way if you were a home baker to produce, let's say, a Twinkie or a Snickers bar or some of those baked products that you find inside of vending machines. You'd really have to go out of your way because hydrogenation, that's how you make a polyunsaturated fat like vegetable oil, and you turn it into a trans fat like margarine. You actually have to go through a process, and the process is called hydrogenation. So to do that, you're going to need a vat. You're going to have to pour the vegetable oil into the vat, and then you're going to forcefully, this is with pressure and heat, you're going to force hydrogen into that mixture of vegetable oil, and you're even going to add in, get this, it's really gross, you're going to add in nickel. You're going to add in a little bit of metal to bombard those chains, these chains here that we were showing you earlier. You're going to bombard these chains with hydrogens so see, I added some red hydrogens in here for you, so that you can block out oxygens. You don't want any oxygens connected to your fat chain if you're trying to create a product that's going to last for several years. Because as soon as oxygen gets into the mixture of these fat chains, then you have like the handle of a zipper. It's like a little key that will start to unravel it. So if you can lock up that system and create what's called a trans fat, then you're eating something that your body cannot digest, but it knows that it is fat. So what's going to happen to it? It can't be used as energy. You did, in fact, already ingest it. It's going to go into the fat stores. So right now, some of us, if we eat a lot of processed foods as children, now we still have a lot of these chemical compounds in our adipose tissue and in our visceral tissue that's going to be really difficult for us to get rid of. So the younger you start your kids and young people that you know on food that is organic or that doesn't contain a lot of these chemicals or trans fats, they're going to do so much better when they get older. They're going to feel so much better at age 20 and 30, and they're going to thank you a lot for it. At first, of course, kids don't like to eat vegetables, and they like to be able to go to a convenience store and just get anything they want to off the shelf. But the truth is that every time you do that, you are increasing their exposure to trans fats. And those trans fats actually lead to some forms of anxiety, dementia. They cause problems for our processes because our entire brains are actually made out of oil. So there's a lot of oils in there, and our brains do best on omega-3 oils, and these trans fats are loaded with omega-6. And those omega-6, they actually block the pathways in our brain and prevent us from doing good cognitive functioning. So stay away from trans fats, avoid them as much as you can. And you say, well, how do I know there's a trans fat in a product that I'm eating? Well, it's simple. When you turn around the back, the labeling, it will tell you hydrogenated oil. So that's the key. First off, if you're opening up a package of something, most of the time there's going to be some processing involved to save the shelf life of that product. So if it is in a package already, and you think about its equivalent that would have been made in a bakery or made in a one-off restaurant, and you say, wow, how is this thing able to last for so long? The secret ingredient is hydrogenated oil. You turn around the back of the label and it says hydrogenated soybean oil, partially hydrogenated. Anything is still hydrogenated. So you want to avoid those types of fats. All right, so while we're on this topic, while we're talking about fats, you already know to stay away from the processed stuff. We already know that. And something's about to happen with our culture, or with the culture of people who live in South Texas. We're about to start eating certain types of foods that are high in fats. All right, nothing wrong with that. We all like tamales, pozole, menudo, pan de polvo, a lot of different foods that are high in fats. And speaking from a social perspective, the reason we do that traditionally is because we're getting ready for winter, or our ancestors used to get ready for winter, or as winter was around, you would want to eat foods that were higher in fats. So if you wonder why you have a craving for things that are higher in fat towards the holidays, or why you have a tendency to see more foods that are higher in fat around the holiday season, that's because traditionally we needed to do things like improve our immune function. The fat that is in your diet creates the buffering system whenever a virus or a bacteria or a disease is trying to get into your system and try to compromise you. The fat that's in your system is what buffers that and prevents it, surrounds it, and uses it along with your immune system and your white blood cells in order to neutralize that threat. So eating more foods that are higher in fat at this time of year was very beneficial to our ancestors. We get sick a lot less often than they did, and we're exposed to many fewer diseases than they were. So there's a good chance that we don't need as many foods that are high in fat. It's just that traditionally and culturally, we have a tendency to continue to enjoy those foods. So, all we're saying is, or all I'm trying to say is, let's look for a way to decrease the foods that are loaded with saturated fats. And if we're going to try to create or recreate traditional foods from the Latino community, or the Mexican community, or the Hispanic community, we can try to incorporate things that have more monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. So we still get the flavor and we still get the product, but yet we've replaced a lot of the saturated fats, and it makes it better for us in the long run. Now, on the scary side, this process has already begun, except food companies are giving us more foods with trans fats, and we're putting them into our traditional or into the Latino Hispanic culture's traditional food products. So we're actually getting more trans fat when we need to be lessening it, and we're still keeping up the same amount of saturated fat. So we're getting a double dose on that bad side. So let's go ahead and know that foods have a longer storage life. So that's another reason why you'd have foods with high fat content. And by making foods that are high fat content and that are made around this time, we could make use of dwindling food supplies. That means that the whatever foods we had left over from the summer and from the last harvest, we could then turn those into foods that have a longer shelf life. So therefore, a lot of the foods that we eat that are high in fats were the ones that sustained us through the winter and protected us. But are they still necessary today? So that's just a question, a cultural question I want to pose to people, and have them start rethinking about the food that they're eating, so that they can make a benefit for themselves and for their families. There is one more topic that I wanted to talk to you about before we close up, and that is the thermic effect of food. So if you've ever heard that when you eat food that has a high fat content, you have a tendency to have that food turn into body fat quickly. This is true, all right? Because fats compared to carbs have a lower thermic effect. What that means is, anytime you eat a vegetable, you have to chew that vegetable, right? You have to masticate it, and then as you swallow it and it makes your way through your digestive system, you're going to have to continue to work on it, chew it, and digest it. Now, as weird as it sounds, all that chewing and digesting actually causes calories to be burned. So that's weird, right? That you eat something, but yet as you're eating it, it's actually causing calories to burn up in your system. So one of the best examples would be celery and carrots. These things, we got to chew them a lot, so it takes a lot of effort to process it. Well, if that's the case, that it takes a long time to chew and process a vegetable, well, then that means that 20 to 25% of the total calories that you were 23% of the calories in the carbohydrate are going to be could be converted into body fat if you don't use them. So carbs do turn into fat. There's a less likelihood that a carb that you ate would be turning into fat, about a 23% less chance, because of the fact that just chewing it and swallowing it as a vegetable, it's the thermic effect. So when you eat something that's high in fat, by contrast, imagine a little teacup full of coconut oil, and I was to just drink that coconut oil down. Okay, there's no chewing involved, there's no digestion involved. So as it makes its way into the stomach and into the rest of the system, it's just going in as a solid product. So that means I only spend 3% of my effort to turn that fat into energy for the rest of the system. So just know that if you're going to eat a meal with high fat content, you want to include a lot of vegetables because that slows the process down. The oil and the fat is also going to do its own job in creating satiety. That means to fill you up. So yes, you should have oils in your diet along with proteins and carbs, but the oils that you get, and so we're going to close up here, the oils you should get should come from monounsaturated fats, things like avocados, peanut, almond, and pistachio. They can come from polyunsaturated omega-3 fatty acids like salmon, sardines, flaxseed, any type of fish. And the oils and the fats that you really need to stay away from are the trans fats. Those are the manufactured, lab-created, very recent types of fats that were created in order to improve the shelf life of foods. And those are things like margarine, shortening, fried foods. You need to stay away from fried food as much as possible because chances are the people who are frying it, they bought a very cheap product so that they could fry up a lot of food. So you could go to a restaurant and say, does this fried chicken, or does this potato or French fry, does it have a lot of trans fats in it? And more than likely they'll tell you no, but you really don't know that for sure because again, they take the vegetable oil and they hydrogenate it so that it can have a longer shelf life. So you do want to stay away from trans fats as much as possible. Stay away from fast foods and stay away from prepackaged foods. All right. Thank you for joining, or thank you for watching this. Give us a like on our City of McAllen Wellness page. I hope you guys are having a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks a lot.